Welcome to another session of INF154. So in this session, we are going to talk about the timer or the repetition with the timer control. So this is all you have to know to code anything for timers. So the purpose of the timer control is to trigger an event at regular intervals. So we'll get to this in details. The length of the intervals is defined by the interval property whose value is in milliseconds. So 1000 represents 1 second. The timer must be enabled or started to start working. So before your timer can work, it must be enabled or started. So when the control is enabled, the tick event is raised every interval. This is where you would add code to be executed. So it is a non-visible control. So let's see how it works in Visual Studio. So I'm going to go to my properties. Not properties, but the toolbox. Then I'm going to just say timer. Then my timer should be placed on my form. No, I chose the wrong thing. This is the daytime picker, which is used to pick dates and times. So I'm going to put the timer here on my form. So it's going to appear here, not on the form. So if you go to the properties of the timer, I can say A up to Z. Then to name it, you just say TMR, then you put the name of the timer. For example, time, like that. So on the properties, you can see that there's a name property, which is what you are used to. Then there's the enabled property. You can set this to true or to false. By default, the timer is, or the dot enabled, it's false. This means your timer is not enabled by default. So you have to enable it for it to start working. Then there's this interval. As we saw, 1000 represents 1 second. Then I'm going to go to this time control. Then I'm going to double click. So when you are double clicking on it, you are going to get this tick event. So this is the tick event. So whatever code you write here, it's going to be executed every after this interval. For example, if this is 1000, every second we are going to execute the code inside this event handler, or the event in simple terms. For example, let's say we want to say message box dot show, then we just say hello whatever. Then I'm just going to say that. Let's execute and see what's going to happen. So a second has already passed, nothing happened. Why is that the case? Because we didn't enable the timer. Remember, they said what? The timer must be enabled or started to start working. So how can we enable the timer? We can create a button, and when we click that button, enable the timer, or I can just double click on the form, for example. Then I'm just going to say, okay, TMR time. You can say dot start, or you can say TMR time dot enabled equals to true. It doesn't matter which one you want to use, they do the same thing. That's how you enable the timer. Then, so this means after every second, this code will be, not real. After every second, this code will be called. This, whatever code you write in the form load event. So when the form loads, this code is going to be executed. So immediately when your form loads, this code will be executed. your timer will be enabled. Then after the timer is enabled, only when the timer is enabled, this code is going to be executed. This means every after 1 second, since we put like 1000 here on the interval, this code will be executed. It must display this hello on a message box after every second. So let's test and see if that's the case. So get hello, hello. Then there are many, like you cannot stop this because every second is displaying hello. Even if I say, okay, no matter how fast you are, it won't close. So how can I stop this? This is bad because you can't just stop it. How can I do? How can I stop this thing? Because it's just going to keep continuing forever. So you are going to go to your task manager. You can search the shortcut. Then I'm going to end this task. That's how you can close it. Otherwise, it won't stop. So it said suspended. So it must close in a few minutes or seconds. So it's still closing. So that's how you can stop it. You can only stop it through task manager. So it must close under task manager. So now I'm still waiting for it to close. So it's closed. So we saw that every second this code is called. Like after every second this code is called. So that's the timer. Every interval or every second, whatever code you write inside this will be called. So every second this message box dot show hello. If I had 1000 lines, those 1000 lines of code will be called after every second. So now let's make it more nicer. Maybe put sort of buttons. So I'm just going to say Control Alt X, then I'm just going to put a button here. Then I can just copy and paste, or I can just drag and drop another button, maybe for stopping and for starting. So I'm just going to say start, then I'm going to call it btn start. So I'm going to call this btn start. Then I'm going to have the stop. So the stop is going to be btn stop. Did I say the name must be btn stop? Then the start thing must be where on this start. I mean stop actually. So I have two buttons. I want when this start button is clicked, the timer must be enabled other than the form load part. So I'm just going to remove this. Then I can, if I want, I can delete this, but not through code. If you delete this, your thing is going to crash. So it's better to delete it from here. I'm just going to click on the form. On the lightning thing here, events, I'm just going to delete that. That's how you would delete like something. Now that thing is not there, the event is not there. So now I want to, when I click start, I want the timer to be enabled. So how do we enable the timer? TMR time dot start, or you can say TMR time dot enabled equals to true. Then I want a button that will stop the timer. So this one will be what will be TMR. Let me go to properties. So to stop the timer or to disable the timer, TMR time dot enabled equals to false, or you can say TMR time dot stop. So this is going to stop your timer. So you can either use this one or this other one. So it's up to you. So let's say I used the stop. So let's see if this is going to work. Let's execute the code again and see. what's going to happen? So when I click start, it must display. You see, after 1 second, it's going to do the thing. But I can't click stop because this is a message box. So the only thing that I can do is okay, but after every second, it's going to do the thing. So I have to end the task here to stop it from working. So now it's suspended. Let's see. So it must close soon. So now the timer is closed, or the time is. So with a message box, it's a bad demonstration. So now let's try to do something cool. Actually, let's try to actually count just from 0, 1, 2. So an attempt will be, okay, let's have an integer, for example, number whatever equals to 0. Then I'm going to say number plus equals to 1, or you can say number plus plus, so that it increases by 1. Then on the form I'm going to put let's say a text box. So I'm going to put a text box that will contain that number. So I'm just going to the properties, then I'm just going to change the name of the, or for the text I can put 0, it doesn't matter. Then I'm just going to change the name to txt n or txt number, whatever. Then I'm going to just change the alignment to center. It's not necessary. So I want this text box to contain values, let's say 0, 1, and so on. Like it will count up from 0 to, let's say, until we click stop. So how will that work? So this code, we know that this code will be called every second. So this is an attempt. Okay, we are going to start at 0, then just increase number by 1, then update the text box. So txt n.text equals to number. So that's the idea. So we increase this by 1, uh we update our text box. Is this going to work? Let's see. So okay, normally before you start pressing buttons, ask yourself what is going to happen when I click the start button. When I click the start button, the code that goes under btn start will be executed. So it will start the timer. So after, when the timer is started, after every interval, this code is going to be executed. So it's going to start number at 0 and increase number by what? By 1. So number is going to move from 0 to 1. Then this 1 will be displayed on the text box. Then after 1 second again, this same code will be executed. Number will be restarted to where? To 0. Then it will be increased to 1. Then this will be updated 1 again. So it seems as if number will get stuck on 1. I will explain why is that. So let's see, start. You see, it's stuck on 1, even though the time is working, but it's stuck on 1. This is because of local variables. So every time the code is executed, this variable is resetted back to 0. So to avoid that, I can make this variable global. So I can say int number starts at 0. Then I'm going to remove this. So let's see what's going to happen when you execute this. Again, before I click start, I ask myself what's going to happen. When the form loads, the first code that is executed is your global variables. So this int number equals to 0, that's the first code that is executed. Then when I click start, it's going to go to the btn start click event handler. Then it's going to execute the code inside. So it's going to start the time. Then when the time is started, only when the time is started or only when the time is enabled, this method will be called, or the code inside this tick event handler method will be executed. So number will be increased by 1. So initially it's 0, 0 increased by 1. Now number is 1. So 1 will be displayed to the text box. Then next iteration, after 1 second, this code will be executed. So number plus plus number was 1, now number will be 2. Then those two will be displayed next second again, and so on. So this will happen every 1 second. So let's start. You see 1 2, then it's going to count. When we click stop, again it's going to go to the btn stop. In the btn stop we get this code tmr time.stop. So if I say stop, it's going to stop. If I say start, it's going to continue where it left because of that global variable. So it's not going to be resetted to 0. What if I wanted it to reset to 0 when I click start? So to achieve that, I can say when I click stop, I have to reset the global variable. So on the stop, I can say, okay, my number must go back to 0 when I stop the time. So my number will be resetted to 0. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to let me close the task manager. Then I'm going to execute the code and see what's going to happen. So again, when I click start, before I click start, global variables are executed. So this number will be initialized to 0. So when I click start, again, number is increased, number is displayed to the text box. After 1 second, number is increased by 1 again, number is displayed to the text box. After 1 second, the same code will be executed. So if we start, then it's going to go like that. Then when I click stop, it's going to go to this code. It's going to stop the time, then it's going to set number to 0. So stop, but it didn't change the number here. When I click start again, number was 0. Then it's going to just enable the time, the number will start at 0 and so on. So it must start at 1 2 3 and so forth. So at stop, I can also update the text box. I can say, okay, when it stops, I can say txtm dot text equals to number. Then I can say to string, whatever, like that. Now when I execute this, it must give the correct output. So when I click start, it goes. Then when I click stops, it goes to 0, like that, which is not ideal. But now let's build something that is practical. So let's consider the stopwatch. So if we go to my thing, then I go to stopwatch. So clock action. Then inside the clock, we want to build a code that will mimic the stopwatch. So notice that with the stopwatch, it's just counting until second reaches 59. So it increments second. Let's avoid the milli. It increments seconds until they reach 59. Then when they reach 59, minute will increase by 1, then second will be resetted to 0. Then again minute will increase 1, 2, 3, 4 until it reaches 59. Then it goes to hour, then it's going to be incremented until it reaches what, 23. Then it's resetted to 0. So we can't wait for the whole day for this to be executed. Let's just follow the idea of a stopwatch. So to do our stopwatch, I'm going to remove this code since it's irrelevant. So the stop, it's just going to stop. Then I'm going to remove this. Even the number, now it's irrelevant. So everything remains the same. When we click start, the time must be started. When we click stop, the time must be stopped. So with the stopwatch, I'm going to need 3 things. There are many ways to do it, but I'm just going to simplify it. I'm just going to put 3 text boxes. So this text box will represent seconds, this one minutes, this one hours. So let's see. So for the text one, for the seconds, I'm just going to say txt seconds or sec, whatever. Then for the minutes one, I'm just going to do what, txt min. So txt min. Then the other one, what, txt hour or hr. So this is what I have. How many variables will I need to keep track of this? I'm going to need 3 variables. So on the global variables, I'm just going to say global variables. So I need second to be 0. We saw why we use global variables from the previous video. Not video, but previous example. Then minutes must be 0 and hour must be 0. This is what I need to do my stopwatch. So notice that the first thing that is incremented is what? If we avoid millisecond from these 3 segments, you see second is incremented first. So the general idea is that we want to increment, like every second we want to increment second. So we increase second by 1. Then after increasing second by 1, we have to check if that second is not equals to 60. So if second is equals to 60, what are we going to do? We are going to increase the minute. We increase the minute only if we have reached 60 seconds. So we are going to increase the minute by 1. But we have to reset the seconds to what? To 0. So second must be resetted to 0. After increasing minute, what do we have to ensure? We have to check if minutes is equals to 60. Only if we have like 60 minutes, we can increase the hours. So that's why we are using this if statement. So we are going to check if, then we can increase hour if only if we have 60 minutes. So but we have to reset minute back to what? To 0. Minute must go back to 0. Then after increasing hour, we have to check if hour is not equals to what. So if hour is not equal, is equals to, actually is equals to 24, that's not, if we have 24 hours, then we can just, I don't know, maybe display a message saying complete. If we had day, we were going to increase day, like day plus plus, because we have 24 hours. But in this case, let's say we are just going to reset hour to 0, something like that. We are going to restart like hour to 0, that's all. Then after doing all of these, we have to update our things, our text boxes. So txt seconds equals to, dot text equals to sec to string. Then txt minutes dot text equals to min dot to string. Then txt hour equals to, or dot text equals to hour to string, like that. Then let's see how it works. So we are going to, I'm going to reduce the interval because I don't want to wait the whole hour or whatever. So I'm just going to the time, then properties, let me reduce, I guess 10, whatever, so that it can be fast. So let's execute this and see what's going to happen. So it's still loading. So again, when the form loads, the first code that is executed is global variables. So sec will be set to 0 minute to 0 hour to 0. Then nothing will change until I do something, because there's nothing I can do now. So when I click start, what's going to happen? The timer will be enabled, and when the timer is enabled, what are we going to execute? We are going to execute the code inside the click or the tick, in this case the time tick event. So second will be increased by 1. So it was 0, then we have to check is, so it's going to go to 1. It's 1 equals to 60. No, 1 equals to is not equals to 60. Ignore everything. We are going to update second to 1. Minute will remain at 0. Hour will remain at 0. Then after 1 second, this second will be increased to 2. Again, we are going to check is 2 equals to 2. No, we are going to ignore everything until our second reach 60. So if second equals to 60, then second will be resetted back to 0. Minute will be increased by 1. Then we check that is 1 equals to 60. Like, it's just going to continue. The problem is that I cannot do like the whole thing manually because it will take time. So let's just start and see. You see how it works. It reaches 59, then it increases this. It's fast because I don't want to wait for the whole 2 minutes or 3 minutes, but that's the idea. That's how it works. That's how it works. Let me see if there's something missing for this video. Yeah, I guess you can analyze these ones. By now you should understand what's happening with these ones. Then another thing, let's try to modify this code so that it uses one button for start. Oh, I didn't test the stop. So let's see how the stop works. So it started. When I click stop, it stops. Then when I click starts, it just resumes, then stop. What if I wanted to do this on one button, not on 2 buttons? What was I going to do? So I can call this start or stop, something like this. So I don't want 2 buttons, I want 1 button. So how am I going to do this? So there are 2 ways actually. You can say, okay, let me delete, and I didn't delete the event handler. This is so wrong. Let me just do this. Then let me click on this and delete event. So for stop, so I'm just going to delete this. Now I can delete this. So it's not deleted anyhow. But let me just remove this code. So let me remove the code. Yeah, so I want the start stop to work for both things. So how am I going to do that? So I can use an if statement to check if the timer is enabled or if the timer is started. So if tmr time dot enabled, then what are we going to do? Uh, then what are we going to do? We are going to stop the time. So if it's enabled, we can say enabled equals to false, or we can say stop, or we can say, and then we can say else tmr time dot enabled equals to true. So we know that this will return true if the timer was enabled. So we have to disable it, or we have to enable it. The alternative of this is you can say tmr time dot enabled equals to not tmr time dot enabled. So if the time was enabled, this was going to return true. So not true, it's false. So it's going to disable it. So you guys can analyze the code. It's not difficult. By now you should know how to analyze these simple codes, the if statements, because loops are just an extension of if statements. So by now I assume that you know how to execute if statements. Or you can do this, it works the same. So let me see if it's going to do the thing, which must. So it's still executing. So when we click start, we know that by default this timer is disabled. So when we click start, it's going to say tmr time enabled equals to, then tmr dot enabled is false. So not false, it's what? It's true. So it's going to be enabled. So let's see. Now tmr dot enabled, it's true. Next time when we click start or stop, whatever, it's going to execute the same code. tmr dot enabled equals to not tmr dot enabled. We know that the timer is now enabled. So not enabled, I mean tmr dot enabled is true. Not true is what? It's false. So it's going to be disabled. So that's the idea, that you can do cool stuff with timers, but I'll just create a really good exercise which you cannot solve with ChatGPT, I think. Or yeah, you can go to your ChatGPT or whatsoever, but that one you won't get the solution. Or you can go to Google, wherever, but you won't get the solution. So I'll just create that exercise. So yeah, I think that's all for the time.